In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of Holy Spirit, one God. Amen. You've been praying for someone, haven't you? And every night when the room goes quiet and the world fades away, you ask God the same question. When? When will they come? When will this loneliness end? And heaven has been silent, not because God doesn't hear you, but because what He's preparing for you requires something you're not ready to give yet. Your stillness, your trust, your willingness to stop searching and start becoming. Let me tell you something that might shake you tonight. The very act of searching is what's keeping you from finding. You've been running from connection to connection, person to person, hoping that someone will finally fill the void. You've been scrolling, seeking, asking, pleading. And every time you thought you found someone, they disappeared like mist. Every time you opened your heart, it got returned to you in pieces. And now you're tired, exhausted, not just physically, but spiritually. You're tired of hoping, tired of believing, tired of waiting for a love that feels like it was promised to you, but never delivered. But here's what God is saying to you right now. In this very moment, stop. Stop searching. Stop chasing. Stop trying to force something that can only be given to you when you're ready to receive it. Because the person who is meant for you is not lost. They are being prepared, and so are you. And until that preparation is complete, no amount of searching will bring them into your life. You can knock on every door, send every message, give every piece of your heart away, and it will all come back empty. Not because you're unworthy, but because the timing isn't aligned with the purpose. You think you've been rejected by people. But what if I told you that every rejection you experienced was God's protection? What if every door that closed in your face was heaven redirecting you from something that would have destroyed you? You're angry at the ones who left. You're hurt by the ones who didn't choose you. But have you ever considered that they were never meant to stay? That their role in your life was to show you what you don't need, so that when the right one comes, you'll recognize them immediately. You've been calling their departure a loss. God calls it a rescue. And I know what you're feeling right now. You're feeling forgotten, like everyone around you is being blessed, while you're still standing in the same place you were a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe longer. You watch people find love. You watch people get chosen. And you smile for them, you celebrate with them, but when you're alone, the pain comes back. That deep, gnawing ache that whispers, what's wrong with me? Why not me? And you've prayed about it. You've cried about it. You've tried to surrender it. But it keeps coming back because it hasn't been healed yet. It's been managed, suppressed, buried, but not healed. God is not withholding love from you as punishment. He's withholding the wrong love to protect you from repeating the same cycles. Because if He gave you what you thought you wanted when you first started praying, you would have ended up bound to someone who couldn't handle the weight of your calling, someone who couldn't match your spirits, someone who would have loved the surface of you but feared the depth. And you would have spent years trying to shrink yourself to fit into a connection that was never built to hold you, but the waiting has changed you. You don't even realize how much you've grown in the silence. You've been in a season where God has been stripping away everything that doesn't serve your future. The need for validation, the desperation for attention, the fear of being alone. He's been breaking you free from the version of yourself that believed love was something you had to earn, beg for, or convince someone to give you. And in the breaking, He's been building something stronger, a version of you that doesn't need someone to complete you because you've learned how to stand complete in Him. You've been crying out for companionship, but God has been teaching you communion. You wanted someone to talk to. He gave you a prayer life that sustains you when no one else is around. You wanted someone to understand you. He gave you a relationship with Him so deep that even when people misunderstand you, you're not shaken. You wanted to be seen, and He's shown you that you've always been seen, fully, completely. Even in the moments you thought you were invisible. There's a reason why the people who are chosen by God often walk through the deepest loneliness. It's because isolation builds a dependency on heaven that nothing else can replace. When you have no one to call, you call on Him. When you have no one to lean on, you learn to lean on His word. When you have no one to comfort you, His presence becomes your comfort. And that kind of intimacy with God cannot be built in a crowd. It can only be built in the wilderness, in the waiting, in the silence. In the nights where it's just you and Him and the questions you're afraid to ask out loud. I need you to understand something. The person God has chosen for you is going through their own wilderness right now. They're being broken down just like you. They're being refined, tested, stretched. They're learning lessons they can't skip. They're shedding versions of themselves that won't survive in the relationship God is preparing. And just like you, they don't understand why it's taking so long. They're wondering if they'll ever be found, if they'll ever be chosen, if they'll ever experience the kind of love that doesn't leave. But God is synchronizing you, not just your calendars, not just your locations, but your maturity, your readiness, your capacity to love without fear, without control, without the wounds of your past dictating the future. He's making sure that when you meet, it's not just attraction, it's recognition. A knowing in your spirit that says, this is different, this is divine, this is what I was being prepared for. You've been wondering why you feel so different from everyone else, why your journey doesn't look like theirs, why your path seems longer, harder, more isolating. It's because you're not called to a common love. You're called to a covenant love. And covenant requires preparation that convenience will never understand. It requires a level of surrender, trust, and obedience that most people aren't willing to give. But you've been giving it, even when it hurt, even when it didn't make sense, even when you wanted to give up. Every tear you cried in secret, God collected. Every night you fought through doubt, He was strengthening you. Every time you chose to worship Him instead of worry, you were building spiritual muscle that you're going to need for what's coming. Because the love He's bringing you isn't just for your enjoyment, it's for your assignment. The person He's sending isn't just your partner, they're your partner in purpose. And that kind of partnership can't be built on shallow foundations. It requires two people who've been through the fire and came out refined. There's something powerful that happens when you stop searching and start resting, when you stop forcing and start flowing, when you release control and step into trust. The desperation falls away, the anxiety fades, and in its place, a quiet confidence rises. Not arrogance, not indifference, but a deep, settled knowing that what's meant for you cannot miss you, that you don't have to chase what God has already assigned, that the right person, at the right time, in the right season, will find you exactly where you are. And I want to speak to the part of you that's afraid it's too late, the part that thinks you've waited too long, that you've missed your chance, that you're too damaged, too broken, too scarred to be loved the way you deserve. That's a lie, and it's a lie that's kept you in bondage long enough. Your past does not disqualify you from your future. Your mistakes do not cancel out your destiny. The delays you've experienced are not denials, they're divine orchestration. And the same God who kept you through every storm is not going to abandon you now. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are not unwanted. Being hidden until the right person is ready to find you. And when that moment comes, you won't have to announce it. You won't have to prove it. You won't have to convince anyone. It will be undeniable, unmistakable. And everything you went through to get there will finally make sense. The suffering wasn't wasted. The tears weren't ignored. The prayers weren't unanswered. They were all ingredients in the preparation. Every battle you fought in private was building the strength you'll need in public. Every moment you chose faith over fear was positioning you for the blessing. Every time you got back up after being knocked down was proof that you're not who you used to be. You've been transformed, refined, made ready. So stop searching, stop straining, stop trying to make something happen that only God can bring to pass. Your job is not to find them. Your job is to become the person who's ready to receive them, to heal what needs to be healed, to forgive what needs to be forgiven, to surrender what needs to be surrendered, and to trust, even when you can't see it yet, that God is working all things together for your good. The person chosen for you is already prayed for, already set apart, already on their way. And when the time is right, when the season shifts, when the preparation is complete, you will meet them. And it will be worth every single moment you waited, every tear, every question, every lonely night. It will all make sense, and you will finally understand why it had to happen this way. Until then, rest, trust, believe, and know that you are held, you are loved, and you are exactly where you need to be. You keep asking God why it feels like nothing is happening. Why the prayers seem to rise into the night and come back without an answer. But the silence you're experiencing isn't absence, it's intention. God isn't delaying your blessing to test your patience. He's preparing you so the blessing doesn't destroy you. What you're waiting for carries weight, responsibility, and purpose. And if it arrived before you were ready, it would become a burden instead of a gift. The stillness you're in right now is shaping your heart, aligning your spirit, and teaching you how to trust without needing constant reassurance. The truth is, the more you search, the harder it becomes to receive. When you chase love, connection, or validation, you're often operating from fear rather than faith. Fear of being alone, fear of missing out, fear that if you stop trying, nothing will happen. But God doesn't work through desperation, He works through alignment. Searching puts pressure on outcomes, while trust creates space for divine timing to unfold naturally, without force or anxiety. Every time you tried to make something happen on your own, you felt the exhaustion that followed. Conversations that went nowhere. Connections that looked promising but collapsed without explanation. That wasn't because you failed, and it wasn't because you weren't good enough. It was because what you were reaching for wasn't ready to meet you where you were going. God was quietly blocking what your heart wanted because He could see what your future needed. Preparation doesn't always look productive. Sometimes it looks like waiting, like silence, like being alone with your thoughts and your prayers. But in that waiting, God is removing the urgency that once controlled you. He's teaching you how to be whole without leaning on someone else to complete you. When you stop searching, you stop grasping. And when you stop grasping, you become able to receive without fear of losing. What's meant for you doesn't require a chase. It won't need constant effort, persuasion, or pursuit to stay. When the time is right, what God has prepared will come with peace, not pressure. You won't have to question it, rush it, or force it to work. Until that moment arrives, your role is not to look outward in desperation, but inward in growth. Because becoming is the doorway to receiving, and trust is the key that opens it. You keep replaying the moments where people walked away, the conversations that ended without explanation, the connections that dissolved when you finally allowed yourself to hope. And in those moments, it felt personal. It felt like rejection spoke directly to your worth. But what you couldn't see then was that God was standing between you and something that would have slowly broken you. What felt like abandonment was actually divine intervention, quietly redirecting your path away from harm. Not everyone who comes close to you is meant to stay connected to your future. Some people are assignments, not partners. They arrive to reveal wounds, expose patterns, and teach lessons that can only be learned through loss. God allows them close enough to show you what feels familiar but isn't healthy, what looks like love but lacks depth. Their exit isn't a sign that you failed, it's proof that the season was complete. You were never rejected because you weren't enough. You were released because you were too much for what they could sustain. Your depth, your calling, your emotional and spiritual capacity required something stronger than what they could offer. God saw that if you stayed, you would have kept shrinking yourself, over-explaining your heart, and accepting half love just to avoid being alone. So He closed the door you were too emotionally attached to shut yourself. Every closed door was protection from repeating cycles that would have delayed your healing even further. God was saving you from investing years into something that couldn't grow with you. What you saw as loss, heaven saw as mercy. What you called pain, God called prevention. If those relationships had continued, they would have distracted you from becoming who you're meant to be. One day you'll look back and thank God for the exits you cried over. You'll realize that the rejection sharpened your discernment and strengthened your boundaries. It taught you the difference between attention and intention, between chemistry and calling. And when the right person arrives, they won't need to be convinced to stay. They'll recognize your value without fear, because protection always prepares you for peace. There were nights when the silence felt louder than any crowd. Moments when you reached for your phone and realized there was no one who truly understood what you were carrying. That kind of loneliness cuts deep, and it can make you question whether God has forgotten where you are. But the truth is, those quiet seasons were never empty. They were sacred. God was drawing you away from noise so He could speak to you without interruption. When people weren't available, God was. When no one checked in, heaven leaned closer. In the absence of human comfort, you learned how to pray from a place of honesty instead of performance. You didn't have to impress anyone. You didn't have to be strong for anyone else. You could come undone in God's presence and still be held together by His grace. That kind of intimacy can't be rushed, and it can't be built when life is full of distractions. Loneliness stripped away your dependence on people for validation and reassurance. You stopped measuring your worth by who stayed or who left. Slowly, almost without noticing, your confidence shifted from human approval to divine assurance. You learned that being alone doesn't mean being unloved. It means God is teaching you how to stand without leaning, how to listen without noise, and how to trust without proof. In that isolation, your faith matured. You stopped believing in God only when the NGS felt good and started trusting Him when nothing made sense. You learned how to worship in waiting, how to hope without evidence, and how to stay anchored even when emotions tried to pull you under. The silence became a classroom, and every lonely moment was shaping spiritual strength you didn't know you had. Now, even when people misunderstand you or walk away, you're not shattered like before. Something steady lives inside you. That stability was born in loneliness. God used the absence of others to show you His sufficiency, and that revelation will carry you forward. Because once you've learned how to be comforted by God alone, no season of waiting can ever break you again. You've wondered why love seems so easy for others but so complicated for you. Why your journey feels longer, heavier, and more demanding. It's because you were never meant for something casual or temporary. God isn't shaping you for convenience. He's preparing you for covenant. And covenant love requires depth, maturity, and responsibility that surface-level connections can't sustain. Many people are satisfied with attraction, chemistry, and comfort. But your spirit was designed for something deeper, a union built on purpose, faith, and endurance. That's why rushed relationships never felt right to you. Even when they looked good on the outside, something inside you knew they wouldn't last. God placed that discomfort in you as protection, because what you're called to requires more than emotion. It requires alignment. Covenant love isn't about filling emptiness. It's about two whole people walking together in obedience. God has been using the waiting to remove your need for instant gratification and replace it with discernment. You've learned not to confuse attention with commitment or affection with faithfulness. That discernment didn't come from ease, it came from delay. The preparation has demanded surrender. You've had to release expectations, timelines, and comparisons. You've watched others settle into relationships while you stayed behind, wondering if obedience was costing you too much. But God was building something rare in you: patience, self-respect, and the ability to love without losing yourself. Those qualities are essential for covenant, and they can't be developed in a hurry. When the right love arrives, it won't feel chaotic or uncertain. It will feel steady, anchored, and purposeful. You won't have to fight for clarity or beg for consistency. What God has prepared for you will meet you at your level of growth, not your level of longing. And then you'll understand why your journey had to be different, because covenant always demands more, but it also gives more than you could ever imagine. You've spent so much time trying to find the right person that you didn't realize God was more focused on who you were becoming. Chasing can feel productive, but it often pulls you out of alignment. God never asked you to hunt down what He has already assigned to you. Your responsibility was never to force connection, but to prepare your heart so that when the moment comes, you're able to receive without fear, insecurity, or doubt. Becoming requires honesty. It means facing wounds you tried to ignore, forgiving people who never apologized, and releasing versions of yourself that were built in survival mode. God has been inviting you into healing, not as a punishment, but as a preparation. Every time you chose growth over bitterness, you were making room for the kind of love that doesn't thrive in unresolved pain. When you stop chasing, you regain peace. You stop measuring your progress by who shows interest and start measuring it by how whole you feel. You no longer rush conversations or ignore red flags just to avoid being alone. Instead, you learn to wait without anxiety, trusting that what's meant for you will arrive without you having to manipulate the outcome. Surrender is the hardest part, because it feels like giving up control. But sir, Render doesn't mean giving up desire. It means placing that desire in God's hands and trusting His wisdom more than your urgency. In that place of surrender, you become steady, grounded, and emotionally available in a way you never were before. And when the right person comes, they won't complete you. They'll complement you. They'll meet you as someone who knows their worth, understands their purpose, and isn't desperate for validation. That's why becoming matters more than chasing. Because what God brings into your life will be sustained not by effort, but by readiness. So now you understand why the waiting had to happen this way. Why the silence wasn't empty, the rejection wasn't random, and the loneliness wasn't wasted. God was never pushing you aside, He was pulling you closer. Every delay was shaping your character, every closed door was guarding your future, and every tear you cried in private was strengthening you in ways you couldn't see at the time. You were being prepared for a love that doesn't confuse you, drain you, or make you question your worth. A love that meets you in peace, not panic. What's coming is built on trust, healing, and purpose, not desperation or fear. And because you allowed God to work on you instead of rushing ahead of Him, you'll be able to recognize it when it arrives. Nothing you endured was meaningless. The nights you felt forgotten, the seasons where nothing changed, the prayers that felt unanswered, all of it was part of a divine process. God was aligning hearts, timing, and maturity in ways no human effort ever could. You didn't miss your moment. You were being preserved for it, so remain at rest. Stay faithful in becoming who God is shaping you to be. Let go of the urge to force outcomes and trust the one who sees the whole picture. What is meant for you will come with clarity, peace, and confirmation, without striving, without fear. And when that day comes, you'll look back and realize the waiting didn't delay your life, it prepared it. You'll see that God was faithful every step of the way, and the love you receive will stand as proof that His timing was always perfect.